I arrive at the upper Geyser Basin just as the afternoon light begins to soften into evening. The drive through Yellowstone has been extraordinary. Bison grazing in meadows, the Yellowstone River cutting through golden valleys, forests of lodgepole pine, stretching endlessly in every direction. But this is why I came. The boardwalk beneath my feet is solid wood, weathered gray by years of exposure to the elements. It winds through the geyser basin like a path through another world, elevated just enough to keep visitors safe from the scalding water that flows beneath the thin crust of earth. Every step produces a hollow sound that echoes slightly in the vast openness of this valley. Steam rises everywhere, dozens of thermal features, each one a window into the incredible heat beneath Yellowstone, each one creating its own column of vapor that drifts and swirls in the cooling air. Some plumes are thin and delicate, others are thick and robust, billowing upward before the wind catches them and carries them away across the basin. The smell is distinctive. Sulfur. Yes, that characteristic scent that some find unpleasant, but I find strangely comforting. It's the smell of Earth's interior made present, the smell of volcanic forces that built this entire landscape. Mixed with it is the clean scent of pine from the surrounding forest, creating this unique combination that exists nowhere else. The temperature is perfect right now, warm enough to be comfortable in just a light jacket, but cool enough that the steam from the hot springs is clearly visible, dramatic against the sky. Later, when true cold arrives with darkness, that steam will become even more pronounced. The contrast between the superheated water and the freezing air creating towers of vapor that glow in the starlight, that I'm one of only a handful of people here. Most visitors have returned to their hotels in West Yellowstone or Old Faithful Lodge. The tour buses have departed. The families with young children have gone. What remains are a few dedicated souls like myself, people who understand that Yellowstone After Hours is a different place entirely. Quieter, more primal, more connected to its own ancient rhythms. Old Faithful is nearby, though I can't see it from here. I can hear it, though, in the distance. The rush of water and steam, the collective gasp of the small crowd that's gathered to watch, the applause that follows. Old Faithful erupts roughly every 90 minutes, as reliable as any natural phenomenon on Earth. And it's been doing so for as long as humans have been observing it. But I'm not here for Old Faithful tonight. I've seen it before. And while it's magnificent, there are other features in this basin that speak to me more deeply. Smaller geysers with longer intervals, hot springs of impossible colors, fumaroles that hiss and steam with quiet intensity. That I continue walking along the boardwalk, moving slowly, taking time to observe each feature I pass. To my left is a hot spring, perfectly circular. It's water, so clear I can see every detail of the intricate formations at the bottom. The color is a brilliant turquoise, so vivid it almost doesn't seem real. That color comes from microorganisms, thermophiles, heat-loving bacteria, and archaea that thrive in water hot enough to kill almost any other form of life. They form mats at different depths based on temperature tolerance, and the light filtering through the water and reflecting off these mats creates that stunning blue. T. On my right is a smaller geyser, currently quiet. Its cone is built up from minerals deposited over centuries, calcium carbonate and silica precipitating out of the water as it cools, building layer upon microscopic layer, creating these bizarre and beautiful sculptures. The cone is stained in shades of orange and brown and yellow, more thermophiles, painting the rock with their pigments. That I stop at a place where the boardwalk makes a gentle curve, offering a view back toward the main concentration of geysers. The sun is lower now, touching the tops of the lodgepole pines that rim the basin. Golden light spills across the landscape, making the steam glow, transforming each thermal feature into a lantern. The contrast between the warm light and the cool blue of the sky is breathtaking. This is Yellowstone, not just a national park, but a supervolcano. Beneath my feet, just a few miles down, is a chamber of magma so enormous that when it eventually erupts again, and it will, though probably not for hundreds of thousands of years, it will reshape the North American continent. The heat from that magma chamber is what drives everything I'm seeing here. Water seeps down through cracks in the rock, is superheated by proximity to the magma, and rises back up, sometimes explosively, creating geysers, hot springs, fumaroles, and mud pots. The Yellowstone supervolcano has erupted 3 times in the past 2 million years. Each eruption was cataclysmic, ejecting hundreds of cubic miles of rock and ash, creating calderas dozens of miles across. The current caldera, formed by the most recent eruption about 640,000 years ago, encompasses much of the park's central region. I'm standing inside a volcanic crater so large that you can't perceive its shape from ground level. But right now, in this moment, Yellowstone is not violent. It's peaceful. The hydrothermal features are safety valves, releasing pressure gradually, constantly, preventing the buildup that could lead to something catastrophic. The earth breathes here, and we get to witness that breath made visible as steam and hot water. The light continues to change. The sun has dropped behind the trees now, and the direct golden light is gone, replaced by the softer, more diffuse light of evening. The sky above is still bright, but shadows are deepening across the geyser basin. The steam plumes stand out even more dramatically now, each one backlit, each one carrying within it the story of heat from deep below meeting cold air from above. I find a bench, one of the few along this section of boardwalk, and sit down. Not to rest, exactly, but to simply be present with this place. To let the experience settle into me rather than rushing from one viewpoint to the next. From where I sit, I can see at least a dozen different thermal features, each one unique, each one telling a slightly different story about the geology and hydrology beneath Yellowstone. Directly in front of me is a hot spring that I've come to think of as my favorite in all the park. It doesn't have a dramatic name like some of the others. It's not the largest or the most colorful, but there's something about its proportions, its colors, its setting that makes it perfect. The spring is perhaps 30 feet across, roughly oval in shape. The water at its center is a deep, almost indigo blue, so deep that it seems to go down forever, though I know it's probably only 20 or 30 feet to the bottom. As my eyes move outward from the center, the color shifts. Deep blue becomes lighter blue, then turquoise, then pale green, near the edges where the water is cooler and different organisms thrive. The rim of the spring is decorated with formations that look almost like frozen waves. These are geyserite deposits, built up over thousands of years from the silica-rich water. When the water flows over the edge and cools, the dissolved minerals precipitate out, adding microscopic layers to these formations. The result is smooth, flowing shapes that catch the light, stained in shades of cream and orange and rust. Steam rises from the surface in lazy swirls. The water is near boiling, about 190 degrees Fahrenheit at the center. That's hot enough to cause severe burns on contact, hot enough that no fish or amphibians can survive. But it's a perfect temperature for the extremophiles that call this their home. I think about those organisms, microbes that were among the first forms of life on Earth, that still thrive in conditions most life cannot tolerate. Scientists studying these thermophiles have made discoveries that revolutionized biology. They found enzymes that remain stable at high temperatures, which led to the development of PCR, the polymerase chain reaction, a technique essential to modern genetics. They found archaea, an entire domain of life previously unknown. They found hints about what early Earth might have been like when the planet was hotter and more volcanic, when life was just beginning to establish itself. Yellowstone is not just beautiful, it's a laboratory, a place where we can study geology, hydrology, microbiology, ecology, all playing out in real time, visible, accessible in a way that's rare on this planet. A small geyser erupts in the distance. not a major eruption. This isn't Old Faithful or Grand Geyser, but it's dramatic enough. Water shoots upward perhaps 20 feet, held aloft for a moment by the pressure of steam beneath, then falls back, splashing into the pool at its base. The whole event lasts maybe 30 seconds, and then it's over, the geyser returning to its quiet state, steam rising gently from where the water fell. The eruption reminds me of the first European Americans to see Yellowstone, mountain men and trappers in the early 1800s who brought back stories of spouting water and boiling mud, stories that most people dismissed as tall tales. It wasn't until the 1870s, when official expeditions explored the region, that the wider world began to believe that such a place existed. Those expeditions led directly to the creation of Yellowstone National Park in 1872, the world's first national park. The idea that land could be set aside, not for economic exploitation but for preservation and public enjoyment, was revolutionary. Yellowstone pioneered that idea, and it spread from here across the United States and eventually around the world. The park's creation wasn't without controversy. Indigenous peoples, primarily the Shoshone, Bannock, and Crow, had been using this area for thousands of years. They knew about the geysers and hot springs long before any European arrived. They had their own names for these features, their own stories about their origins. The creation of the park meant their exclusion from lands they traditionally used, a pattern that was repeated across the American West as national parks were established. Today, there's increasing recognition of that history. The National Park Service is working more closely with tribes to incorporate indigenous perspectives, to acknowledge the deep-time depth of human presence in Yellowstone. It's a complicated history, as so much of American history is. And sitting here in the fading light, I think about all the people who've looked at these same geysers, who've breathed this same sulfur-scented air, who felt that same sense of wonder at Earth's power made visible. The temperature is dropping noticeably now. The sun has set completely, though the sky remains bright with twilight. I can feel the cold beginning to assert itself, creeping in wherever my jacket doesn't quite cover, touching my face and hands. This contrast, the hot water steaming around me, and the cold air is part of what makes Yellowstone winters so spectacular. When deep cold arrives, the thermal features create their own microclimates, pockets of warmth surrounded by freezing air, and the steam becomes so thick that it's almost like fog. But tonight isn't winter. It's late summer or early fall. That perfect time when the days are still warm, but the nights remind you that winter is coming. The air has that crisp quality, that particular clarity that comes with cooler temperatures. Every breath feels clean, pure, carrying the scent of pine and thermal features and the slight hint of coming cold. Stars are beginning to appear. Just a few at first, the brightest ones, Venus and Jupiter, visible near the horizon. But as the sky continues to darken, more emerge. The thing about Yellowstone is its remoteness, its distance from major cities. Light pollution is minimal here. On a clear night, the sky reveals itself in its full glory, and thousands of stars become visible. That I stand up from the bench, my muscles slightly stiff from sitting, and continue my walk along the boardwalk. The wood is cooler under my hands now when I touch the railing. My breath is starting to create small clouds when I exhale. The transition from day to night is happening all around me, and I'm fortunate enough to witness it in one of the most extraordinary places on Earth. Another hot spring comes into view, this one different from the last. Its water is more milky, less transparent, suggesting higher mineral content or different types of organisms. The color is more green than blue, shading toward yellow at the edges. Steam rises thickly from its surface, and I can hear the water bubbling slightly, movement driven by convection as the hottest water rises and cooler water sinks. The basin is becoming quieter as darkness approaches. The few other visitors have gradually drifted away, heading back to their accommodations. Soon, I'll be alone out here, just me and the geysers and the stars. The thought doesn't frighten me. If anything, it's exactly what I want: this solitude, this chance to experience Yellowstone without crowds, without distractions, with nothing between me and the raw power of this volcanic landscape. True darkness has arrived now, and with it, a transformation. The Geyser Basin, dramatic in daylight, becomes something entirely different after dark. The thermal features, still steaming, still bubbling, are now sources of light themselves, glowing faintly from their own heat, each one a small beacon in the darkness that I've moved to a different section of the boardwalk, one that brings me closer to the edge of the ancient lodgepole pine forest that surrounds the basin. The trees here are survivors. Many date back to before the great fires of 1988, when nearly a third of Yellowstone burned in what was at the time one of the largest wildfire events in modern American history. Those fires were controversial. The National Park Service's decision to let many of them burn naturally, following a fire management policy that recognized fire as a natural and necessary part of the ecosystem, was questioned by many. But the fires, while dramatic, were not catastrophic. The forest regenerated remarkably quickly. Lodgepole pines, the dominant tree here, have serotinous cones that require the heat of fire to open and release their seeds. Within a year of the fires, the forest floor was carpeted with pine seedlings. Now, decades later, the forest is dense again. Young pines stand alongside the fire-scarred trunks of older trees that survived. The ecosystem is diverse, vibrant, arguably healthier than it was before the fires. Yellowstone taught an important lesson about the role of fire, about the danger of suppressing something that nature intended to happen regularly, that I can see the silhouettes of the trees against the last light in the western sky. Their forms are spare, linear, reaching upward. Between them and above them, the stars are multiplying. The Milky Way is beginning to show itself, that great river of light cutting across the sky. Our galaxy is plain visible from our position within it. Behind me, a geyser begins to erupt. I turn to watch, and even in the darkness, I can see the column of water rising, illuminated by moonlight and starlight, creating a momentary fountain that catches what little light exists and throws it back, sparkling. The sound is louder in the quiet of night, the rush of water, the hiss of steam, the splashing as water falls back to earth. It lasts perhaps a minute, and then subsides, returning to quiet bubbling that I think about what it must have been like to be here before there were boardwalks, before there was a park, when this was true wilderness, dangerous wilderness. 2, the thin crust over many of the thermal features can break unexpectedly, plunging someone into near boiling water. There have been accidents over the years, tragic reminders that Yellowstone's beauty comes with very real risks, but the boardwalks, carefully engineered and regularly maintained, allow safe access. They let millions of people every year witness something extraordinary. And while some purists might argue that infrastructure diminishes wilderness, I see it differently. These boardwalks are a compromise, a way to preserve the resource while allowing people to experience it. Without them, the damage from millions of footsteps would be severe, the thermal features themselves at risk. The cold is more pronounced now. I'm glad for my jacket, glad I brought a warm hat that I can pull down over my ears. The temperature has probably dropped into the 40s Fahrenheit, possibly lower, and with the clear sky, it will continue dropping through the night. But here, near the hot springs, there's warmth. The steam carries heat. And when the breeze shifts just right, I can feel that warmth touch my face, a reminder of the incredible temperatures just below the surface. That I find another place to sit, this time on the boardwalk itself, my back against the railing, legs stretched out in front of me. It's not particularly comfortable, but comfort isn't really the point. I want to be still, want to let the night settle around me, want to absorb this experience completely. The sounds of the Geyser Basin at night are subtle but distinctive. The constant background of steam escaping from various vents, the occasional bubble breaking the surface of a hot spring, the whisper of wind through the pine trees. And underneath it all, silence. The deep, profound silence of wilderness, the kind that's increasingly rare in our noisy world, that my eyes have adjusted fully to the darkness now, and I can see more details than I could at first. The steam plumes are visible as lighter columns against the dark sky. The shapes of the surrounding hills and trees are distinguishable. And the stars are incredible. Living in a city, as I do most of the time, I forget what the night sky really looks like. We see a handful of stars, the brightest ones, and we call it a clear night. But this is what humans saw for most of our existence. This is the night sky that inspired ancient astronomers, that guided travelers, that sparked questions about our place in the universe. The Big Dipper is prominent, its pointer stars leading to Polaris, Cassiopeia on the opposite side of the pole star. The summer triangle's still visible, though it's moved from overhead to the western sky as the seasons change. And the Milky Way, stretching from horizon to horizon, so dense with stars that it looks almost like a cloud, that a satellite passes overhead, a steady point of light moving against the thick stars. Modern human presence, even here, even in this remote place. It's moving west to east, probably in a sun-synchronous orbit, one of the thousands of objects we've placed in space for communication, navigation, weather monitoring, scientific research. The geyser erupts again, the same one as before, or perhaps a different one. I can't quite tell in the darkness, but I watch the water rise and fall, watch the steam catch the starlight, and I'm struck by how this place is simultaneously ancient and alive. The rocks beneath me are hundreds of thousands of years old. The thermal system has been active for millennia, yet it's constantly changing, constantly dynamic. New vents open, old ones close. Geysers change their eruption patterns. Hot springs shift in color and temperature. Yellowstone is not static. It's a living system, powered by heat from below, shaped by water and minerals and microorganisms, creating and recreating itself continuously. I stand up, my legs stiff from sitting on the hardboards, and stretch. The night is fully established now. It's probably around 9 or 10 o'clock, though I'm not checking my phone, not wanting the bright screen to ruin my night vision or disturb the experience. Time has become fluid anyway, measured not by clocks but by the movement of stars, the cooling of air, the rhythm of geysers, that I begin walking again, retracing my steps along the boardwalk, heading toward the area where I've set up my camping chair earlier in the day. I'm planning to spend several more hours out here, watching the stars roll across the sky, listening to the geysers, breathing the sulfur-scented air, existing in this thin slice of time between sunset and sunrise, when Yellowstone belongs to those few willing to be out in the dark and cold. I've settled into my camping chair now, wrapped in a blanket I brought for exactly this purpose. The chair is positioned to give me a clear view of both the geyser basin and the sky above. I'm warm enough, comfortable enough, and perfectly content. The night has deepened further. It must be approaching midnight, that quiet hour when even in wilderness, there's a sense of the world pausing, taking a breath before continuing its rotation toward morning. The temperature has dropped into the 30s, cold enough that my breath creates substantial clouds, cold enough that the steam from the geysers is incredibly dramatic, rising in thick columns that persist far longer than they did earlier in the evening. My mind is quieted. The thoughts that chased each other during the day have slowed, spaced out, become less insistent. This is one of the gifts of wild places. They demand presence. You can't be here, truly here, while your mind is elsewhere. The experience is too immediate, too vivid. It pulls you into the present moment and holds you there. That I think about sleep, about the fact that eventually, probably soon, I'll need to head back to my cabin in the park's interior. But I'm not ready yet. There's something sacred about being out here at this hour, something that shouldn't be rushed. The indigenous peoples who lived in and around Yellowstone for thousands of years had their own relationships with these thermal features. The Crow, Blackfeet, Shoshone, and others had names for this place. understood its power, incorporated it into their cosmology and practical life. Some features were used for cooking. The hot water was useful for certain kinds of food preparation. Other features were considered sacred, places where the spirit world was close to the physical world, where careful respect was required. When European Americans arrived and began to name these features, they often chose fanciful names based on their appearance. Morning Glory Pool for its resemblance to the flower, Castle Geyser for its cone's resemblance to a castle turret, Grotto Geyser for its cave-like appearance. These names stuck, became official, are what we use today. But they're not the only names these places have ever had. And it's worth remembering that the moon has risen now, not quite full but close, bright enough to cast shadows. The light transforms the geyser basin once again. Where starlight alone left everything in shades of gray and black, moonlight adds dimension, reveals texture, creates this luminous quality that makes the landscape feel almost dreamlike, that I can see the steam plumes more clearly now, each one a sculpture of vapor and light, rising from its source and then dissipating as it reaches cooler air. I can see the terraces of geyserite formations, their smooth surfaces catching and reflecting the moonlight. I can see the dark shapes of the lodgepole pines, sentinels around the basin, unchanged in form whether viewed by sun, stars, or moon, that my eyelids are growing heavy. This is natural, expected. I've been awake since early morning, driven into the park, hiked several miles, spent hours observing and thinking. My body is ready for rest, but there's something about being here, in this place, under this sky, that makes me want to resist sleep just a little longer. Another geyser erupts, smaller than the others I've watched tonight, but in the moonlight, it's beautiful. The water rises in a graceful arc, catches the light, falls back. Steam billows, glows, drifts away. The whole event is silent from this distance, a visual phenomenon without accompanying sound, which somehow makes it more mysterious, more magical, that I think about all the people who will visit Yellowstone in the coming days, weeks, months. Millions every year. Most will come during the day. We'll see the geysers under sun, we'll take photographs, and move on to the next viewpoint. And that's fine. That's wonderful, actually. The more people who experience Yellowstone, the more who understand why places like this need to be preserved. But a smaller number will come at night. We'll brave the cold and the darkness. We'll sit as I'm sitting now, wrapped against the chill, watching steam rise under stars. And they'll have an experience that's fundamentally different, one that touches something deeper, that connects them to the long human history of looking up at the night sky and feeling both small and infinite at the same time. The Milky Way has shifted in its position across the sky, marking the passage of hours. The constellations have wheeled in their slow dance. Polaris remains fixed in the north, the one constant around which everything else revolves. And beneath that sky, Yellowstone continues its ancient work, heating water, creating steam, erupting geysers, demonstrating that Earth is not a dead rock, but a living, dynamic, powerful planet. Why breathing has become very slow, very deep. In through the nose, filling my lungs with cold, clean air tinged with sulfur. Out through the mouth, watching my breath cloud and drift. In again, out again. The rhythm is meditative, calming, centering. I'm aware that I should probably head back soon. That staying out here much longer isn't practical. That sleep in an actual bed will be more restorative than nodding off in this chair. But I'm reluctant to leave. This experience feels precious, unique, something to be savored to the very last moment point. One more geyser erupts in the distance. One more column of water rising toward the stars. One more reminder of the heat beneath, the power contained, the forces that shaped this landscape and continue to shape it. And I watch, grateful for this opportunity, grateful for this place, grateful for this night. Eventually, I stand. My muscles are stiff from sitting, from the cold, but they loosen as I move. I fold the chair, gather the blanket, and begin the walk back along the boardwalk toward the parking area. My footsteps echo in the silence. The steam continues to rise around me. The stars continue their slow wheel above. I'll sleep soon. Deep, restful sleep earned by a day spent in wild places, by hours under open sky, by the simple act of being present with something larger than myself. And when I wake, Yellowstone will still be here, still steaming, still erupting, still demonstrating Earth's power and beauty. Tomorrow, other visitors will walk these boardwalks. Some will come at night, as I did, and they'll have their own experiences, their own moments of wonder, their own connection to this extraordinary place. But tonight was mine. This night under the stars at Yellowstone, among geysers and ancient forest, breathing sulfur and pine, watching steam rise toward infinity. This night, I was present with the planet's power. And that's something I'll carry with me, something that will sustain me when I'm back in the city, back in the routine of daily life. The memory of this night, this place, these stars, the parking area appears ahead. A few other vehicles remain, their owners presumably doing something similar to what I've been doing, seeking the park after dark, seeking the version of Yellowstone that only reveals itself to those willing to brave the cold and dark. That I reach my car, load the chair and blanket, but before I get in, I turn back for one last look. The basin is still visible from here, steam plumes rising against the night sky. The stars are still brilliant above, and somewhere in the darkness, a geyser erupts, marking time in its own ancient rhythm. This is Yellowstone. Not just a park, but a presence, a force, a reminder that we share this planet with powers far greater than ourselves. And for one night, I was allowed to sit in the presence of that power, to witness, to wonder, to simply be. I get in the car, start the engine, and begin the drive back to my cabin. The road is empty, the forest is dark, and in a few hours, dawn will come, bringing new light to the geysers, bringing new visitors to the park, beginning a new day in this ancient place. But I'll be asleep by then, dreaming of steam and stars, of heat from below and cold from above, of water erupting toward the sky and falling back to earth. Dreaming of Yellowstone,